Welcome to Inside Creative Minds. I'm your host, Trey Goodman. Well, we made it to show 25, and that's thanks to you. Thank you so very much. Now, we have a very special show for you this time. We're coming to you from Gammage Theater in Tempe. We're going to talk to Donald Doyle. He's a former professor of theater at ASU, now a professional storyteller. You don't want to miss that. But before that, a real treat. We got to sit down with a very charismatic, very creative executive director of Gammage, Colleen Jennings Roggensack. Check it out. Well, Colleen, welcome to Inside Creative Minds, and thanks so much for having us here at the beautiful Gammage Center.
Thank you, Trey. It's just fantastic to be here and to welcome you to my house.
Absolutely. Now, you're the executive director of Gammage, but a few other things. Can you give us a little bit about your bio? I know
Sure.
it's longer than my arm.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sort of a quick snapshot. I'm the executive director of ASU Gammage and assistant vice president of culture for Arizona State University.
Yeah.
So that not only includes Gammage, but includes a small theater in Scottsdale, the Care Cultural Center,
Absolutely.
any non-athletic event that happens at Wells Fargo Arena or Sun Devil Stadium,
Yeah.
or on the riverfront, and everything and anything from the presidential debate to halftime show at Super Bowl 30 to laying Senator Goldwater to rest.
It's just amazing the
is.
number of locations and how creative you have to be, and you're in charge of all of that. I mean, we're talking
Yes.
fiscal and creative and management, all of that, I assume. correct?
All of it together, but I have this amazing staff.
Yes.
So I'm not the one-armed paper hanger running around and doing this. I have some very brilliant people who we work together as a team to make all of this happen. People often will say to me, how did you come to this? Or they go, you have the best job in the world.
Right.
And I do. And then they'll say, but then how did you get this job? And there was kind of no rhyme or reason.
Yeah.
When you think about my background, my father was in the military, and so I lived in 13 states and 2 foreign countries before I was 13 or 18, and so it gave me a real thirst for the world and for culture. I was a choreographer and a dancer, and so that was my real love that led me into this field of theater management. And then I had a great mentor in Shelton Stanfill who took a chance on me and said, I think you could learn this business. So I've been really thrilled and excited about this work, which is called presenting the performing arts. I've been doing it now for 32 years, 17 of those years here at Gammage.
You don't even look that old. Come
Oh,
on,
God bless
come-
you.
Come on.
Thank you, thank you.
I mean, I have the director probably won't like it because it'll make noise, but I mean, this is just a part of your bio. I was like, are you kidding me? This is amazing. What more is there for you to do?
Well, I think there's so much
Yeah.
more to do, because one of the great things about art and culture and the enduring thing, and President Kennedy said, you know, we will not be judged by our policies or our buildings, we'll be judged by art and culture that we leave behind. And I think there are all of those different ways as our country, the demographics shift and change,
Right.
of how to broaden that scope and that vision of what art and culture is in our country.
Well, what is Gammage itself all about? And most people think you bring in great Broadway, which you do, but I think there's more to it than that.
There is absolutely more to it than that. We have a mission, and it's called Connecting Communities. And we connect communities through the arts. So we do have the best of Broadway in
Yes.
the world. We are the #1 touring Broadway market in the country today.
Oh.
People will say, oh, I don't want to see Phantom of the Opera here because I'm going to see it in New York or London. Well, guess what? Those performers and those sets that you see in New York and London, you see here. When people say, well, but I want to see what's current on Broadway, I say, oh, like Mary Poppins, or August Osage County that won the Tony for Best Play, or In the Heights, which won the Best Musical, they're here. And those artists who performed there are performing here. So the best of Broadway indeed is here, but we know that art is really more than just spectator.
Yes.
It is also about participation.
Right.
So in our cultural participation role, we have everything from working with 35 school children during the course of the year. You know, Trey, what's happening with our schools
Oh.
today. The
Yeah,
arts are
yeah.
being shoved aside. So often a student's only interaction with the arts will be here at Gammage. So we bring students here for performances. We bring performers to schools. We teach teachers to teach the arts.
Why do you think art is so important to the community?
I believe that art's so important to the community because it's a reflection of who we are.
Okay.
There's a great saying, there's an African saying in all villages, and it says Ubuntu. I am because you exist. And so often on the stage or in the classroom or in a mall, where artists are interacting, we get to see each other. We get to learn about each other. We get to laugh with each other, cry with each other, fight with each other, learn about our differences and our likes. I think that's why it's so important.
I mean, you seem so excited about the organization that you're in charge of.
Yes.
What do you, on a day-to-day, like, what are you doing? What are you personally doing?
Okay, this is when people say, oh, I really love your job. My job can range from, I am a Tony voter and the only Tony voter in the state of Arizona, which means I can travel to New York, and last year alone I saw 58 plays and musicals.
Oh my Lord.
So I see a lot of work. I read scripts, but I also spend time thinking about how to communicate the arts out. So I speak often, whether it's with the Girl Scouts, the National Charity League, every Rotary, and there are 40 Rotaries in the Valley of the Sun, have had an opportunity to hear about art and culture and what we do. But I also do things like when I am in an audience and what's watching a performance, I'm a member of the community, someone will tap me on the shoulder and go, "Gamage lady, there's some cold air blowing on me." And do you know what I do? I get up and figure out what that cold air is and how to take care of it. You know, someone will write me and say,
You're very hands-on.
Oh, I'm very hands-on. Today I had a young woman come in to see me, and she's a high schooler, and she's on her way to college, and she wants to be involved with wardrobe. And she said, you know, I took a chance. I called the office and said, could I meet with Colleen Jennings Rogensack? And they went, sure. And we had a meeting today, and we talked about what that meant. And our next show that's going to come into town, we're going to arrange for her to shadow the wardrobe
That's
mistress.
amazing.
And those are the kinds of things I think that makes ASU Gamage integral to the community that we live in. That this is everyone's Gamage. It's not just my Gamage, but it's your Gamage. It's Kelsey's Gamage, the young lady who came to see me today. It's everyone's Gamage, and that's really my job. I also raise money. And let's not kid ourselves. In this climate today, we do a lot of fundraising because ticket prices alone don't pay for the work that's on the stage. We also work with a number of artists who our job is to help them further their artistic vision. So Anne Bogart, who's arguably one of America's finest directors, spent 3 years with us working on creating a new work every single year. I spoke with you just a little while ago about Bill T. Jones, a choreographer who wants to work in the medium of broadcast and to be able to bring dance to people who can't afford to sit in the audiences. But while having said that, one of Gamage's true missions in life is to find a way for everyone to get into the theater. So we try to gauge our tickets, we try to do ticket lotteries, we try to do some giveaways, we try to make it possible for people to go, and we work in partnership with businesses. So that's, you know, when you say what my day is like, that's
busy.
part of my
You're
day.
very busy and very creative.
Yes.
How do you bridge that to the younger group of kids, maybe the junior high or high school, who sometimes feel maybe lost, or they're not quite sure, they're not sure what they want to become, but they see you and I want to be like you, or you're fantastic. How do you help them get to that spot?
You know, that is such a great question, because we have an amazing program we call Kaleidoscope. And we began 17 years ago working with the schools, and we started working with 10 teachers in 10 schools with 10 students.
Wow.
And we went and we sat down with the superintendents and the principals and said, we want to have these teachers and these students come to Gamage, see a Broadway show, we'll build a curriculum, we'll give them a chance to not only talk with the artists on the stage, but with our staff and their jobs. And the principals and the superintendents looked at us and said, really, what's this going to cost? And we said, nothing. We will go out and raise the money. And that was 17 years ago, and that program still exists. And so part of that time is I actually go to the Kaleidoscope dinner and talk with young people, not just about a life on the stage, but a life behind the stage or in front of the stage.
Well, what's on the horizon? What's churning in your mind creatively? That you've done a lot. You've done more than most people ever have done. It's amazing. But you've got more to do, I can tell.
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. Because one of the things that we want to be able to do, as we talked about earlier, our mission is connecting communities.
Right.
We have kind of a broader vision of cultural sustainability in our communities, not only here in Tempe, throughout Arizona, across the country and around the world, the notion of how do you sustain culture.
Yes.
And I think that's a studied art form. It's not only about the presentation of the arts, but it's having discussions. It's trying different messages out in reaching people. It's about Arizona State University's access, excellence, and impact. It's all of those things to sustain the life of the artist, which is integral to our community,
Right.
which is so important to our young people, that they learn how to become great civic leaders, and culture plays a role in that.
How do you stay so in touch?
Oh, I do a lot of reading. In fact, I said that to the young woman who was visiting with me today. I said, you should read the papers. You should read novels. You should see as much as you human possibly can. When you ask about my background, I did not come from affluent parents, but wherever we lived, my parents taught us that we could usher and see work. So
That's being creative.
It's being creative. You know, I saw Madame Butterfly at the Met. I heard Bernstein conduct. I sat on the steps and watched first run Broadways. So I learned that that work was all of ours and how to access that. So I think that that's part of it, is just learning. And then I listen to people. I love meeting people. The thing about this business of presenting is it's a business of relationships. I now know you, Trey.
Yes.
I know you know television. I don't know a lot about TV. So now I have a
But
contact.
you're on TV right
But
now.
I'm on TV right now. I am on television right now. But I have a contact
Yes.
about television. And it's really important. I also, again, hire really great, smart, creative people, and I get out of their way.
That always
I
seems to
let
be a
them do
key
that.
in successful people, I find. Find people that really know what they're doing and let
Absolutely.
them do it, right?
Absolutely. You know, this whole new world of social networking,
Yes.
of tweeting, and all the, I'm a dinosaur lady. But I have great staff. Dana knows a lot about that. Michael Porto knows a lot about that. So I have staff who tell me those things. I also have a senior director of programs. He travels as much as I do, so he can learn things. I have a director of operations, Terry, and she knows the state of the art, because she'll come and say, you know what, our lighting board is 100 years old. We at least need a 50-year-old lighting board. So I have staff that consistently keep me fresh and alive. And I think that's what's really important about art and culture and about this business. It's cradle to grave. You know, I hope that I will be 100 years old sitting here with you saying, do you know what I just saw? I just saw this amazing play, which will be fantastic in Gamage, and everyone will go, oh my goodness, I didn't even know this existed.
Your passion is tremendous.
Thank you, Trey.
I mean, I so appreciate you letting us come into Gamage. This is such a facility.
Isn't this
I mean,
wonderful?
It is amazing. 45 years old and still going strong.
And Mr. Wright was a genius.
Yes.
I mean, he knew that this place could be magical night after night after night. So he put 27 different colors of terracotta in here. He put 3,007 seats in here, so as many people as possible could come in here. And he made it so you and I are sitting on this stage and you think, 3,000 seats, this is a really cold environment. It isn't. It's a very close, contained environment. And many people don't know this is the last building Mr. Wright worked on. And neither Mr. Wright nor President Gamage, whose vision it was to have Frank Lloyd Wright build this theater, lived to see it completed. So I think we are keeping them and their vision alive, along with our commitment to connecting communities through the arts.
Well, thanks so much for coming
Thank
on the
you,
show.
Trey.
We could talk for another half
We
hour
can.
easily.
Let's do this again.
Let's catch up again, okay?
Okay,
All right.
thank you so much. This is great.
Well, Colleen was amazing. Stick around. Inside Creative Minds will be right back.
Supporting locally owned businesses is better for the economy, builds unique communities, and preserves the environment. Find out more at localfirstaz.com. Think local, buy local, be local.
Welcome back to ICM. Let's go meet a professional storyteller, Donald Doyle.
Well, Don, thanks so much for joining us on the set of Inside Creative Minds, and we're here at Gamage. And I know you're a professional storyteller, that's what we're going to talk about this evening, but you have a tie to Gamage. Talk about that.
I do indeed. I watched them dig the hole for
Right.
this building.
In 1962?
62, I came.
Yeah.
And as a faculty member in the theater department. And Jim Yater, who was the only professor in theater at that time, he and I used to come over on our lunch hour and watch them dig.
Wow.
And walk down in the hole.
And you were thinking of what would be one day,
And
right?
dreaming of
What
what
would
would
be.
be. And knowing then that I was going to get to direct in here was exciting.
1964-65 was the first season. You directed the very first theatrical production.
The university produced one.
Yes.
Yeah, they had a symphony for the grand opening, but I got to do the first university production.
And it was?
West Side Story.
Wow.
And it filled this auditorium
Yeah.
clear up to the top balcony.
How does it feel 40, 45 some years later, you're here on the set.
Yeah, well, it was like home in a way.
Yeah.
And it, you know, it was especially important because it was the Frank Lloyd Wright
Yes.
building, and the whole community was excited about it. And
Yeah.
certainly the theater department was.
Well, let's talk a bit about what brought you to ASU, bit of your background, and how you were a professor at ASU for 30-some years, right?
Yes.
But before that?
Before that, before I came here, I was a student. I worked at, my first teaching job was at DeKalb, Illinois.
Okay.
And I got my master's at Northwestern, and then
Okay.
went there to teach. And then I had been here as a student
Right.
before that. And Jim Yater called and he said, "You want to come back to the warm country?" And I said, "I do,"
Yeah.
after being in Illinois. And
Right.
so I got to come back and start the first children's theater program that we offered.
And children's theater was important to you.
It
You
was.
Had you not been an actor in?
I had.
In children's theater?
Yeah, I was at the Goodman Theater
Yeah.
in Chicago.
Wow.
And because I was short and looked young and had hair, I got to play all the young boys in the
Wow.
kid shows, they call
Wow.
them. And so that was a big part of my dream,
Yeah.
was to continue that work. And that's what I came here to do. And we didn't have money to
Yeah.
do it, but the first children's play I directed was Rumpelstiltskin
Yeah.
on the set of Othello.
Oh,
Because
wow.
we couldn't
Yeah.
we didn't have enough money to build another set.
Well, you know, 30 years as a professor at ASU, I mean, that's amazing in itself. And then now you have this whole other career. You're a professional storyteller. What is storytelling?
What is storytelling? Well, I guess it's relating events and experiences and stories that touch your heart in some way,
Okay.
and will touch the listener's heart. And I believe it's an important art form.
What got you started into storytelling?
Well, I was teaching a class here in creative drama, and
Here at ASU?
At ASU.
Yeah.
And as a part of that, I had a storytelling segment because we dramatized stories.
Okay.
And one time I was doing a night class at a Scottsdale school, and the teacher called the next day and she said, "Would you come and just tell stories? And you don't need to dramatize them, just come and tell stories to my class because we want to know." And I did, and she gave me $25. And I thought, this is cool. And then that night, a teacher from the same school called, and she said, "If you come to my class, I'll give you $25 too."
And you're like, wow.
And I did. I've raised my price since then, but that was the way I began.
Why storytelling?
Why not?
Okay.
I mean, it's a part of it's the oldest art form we have,
Yes.
isn't it? It's how people communicated with
Right.
each other as far back as time, telling what happened to them and how they feel and what they saw and how they hunted and what they killed and how they did it. And
I was going to ask you what the message is when you're trying to tell a story, but you've sort of answered that, right? Haven't you? I mean,
Well-
depending on the story, I guess.
yeah, it's we all are storytellers, you
Yeah.
know. Some people do it on the stage, some people do it over the dinner table,
Yeah.
but we all do it. And it's just, and I didn't realize I was using it for a while as only a tool
Okay.
to teach drama. But
Right.
I went to my first storytelling festival and conference and learned that it was indeed an art form,
Yes.
almost lost art form. And so I began to really study it and appreciate it more for what it is.
What's the best part about storytelling?
Well, as a former actor,
Yeah.
being able to do what I'm doing now with you and look you right in the eye
Yeah.
while I'm telling something that's important to me and know that you appreciate it and understand it, and I can communicate just to you as if you're the only one in the world, although I might be talking to 500 people,
Right.
that it's your story and I want you to understand it and appreciate it.
You know, speaking of that, we've been spending a few minutes here talking about storytelling. Let's have you tell us a little bit of a story. Maybe you can tell the audience, just give us a little sample of what it's like to hear a Don Doyle do his storytelling. So if you would, please.
All right. Well, I've always wanted to be Santa Claus. I always thought it would be such great fun. I have 4 sons of my own, but I always wanted to play Santa Claus. And one time my wife and I were at a movie theater, And I was sitting in the lobby after the movie, and my wife went in the restroom, and I was sitting there by myself on a bench, and a little boy came by, maybe 4 years old, and he sat down beside me on the bench, which was about 4 feet. And he was looking at me. I had a bright red sweater on, and I have a white beard. And he kept moving over a little bit at a time toward me. And pretty soon he was right next to me. And he reached up and just gently touched my beard. And he said, "Are you Santa Claus?" And I said, "Oh, right now I wish I was." And then his mother came out and took him away. But I always thought, for that moment, I was Santa Claus. And I thought, how special.
Wow. So you certainly enjoy telling stories. I can just see it in your eyes.
Oh, I love to tell stories. And that was a meaningful one to me. And just because of his innocence and his wonder, things we usually lose.
Do you like to tell stories about personal events, or
Yes.
or does it depend on the event? I mean, you said you go around the country. And
I do.
So there's certain events maybe that have certain types of stories they're looking for you to tell. How does that work?
Well, I tell a lot of Irish stories, which is my heritage.
Okay.
And a lot of personal stories about growing up in Iowa and spending the summers on a farm with my grandparents. And
People like to reminisce and hear things
they do.
like that, don't
And
they?
it's wonderful fun to see them identify
Yes.
with the things you're telling.
Right.
And as I was talking to someone earlier, they were asking how I choose stories. And it's just something you do when you go to the space you're going to be in and you see the people you're going to tell to.
So you don't know maybe till you get there?
That's true. I have a pretty good repertoire,
Oh,
so
okay.
I can choose.
Yeah.
But sometimes you feel the need to tell a story, and you know afterwards there was a reason for that. And sometimes people come up and say, "Oh, I'm so glad you told that story. I have had that experience, and I thought it was the only one," or "That happened to me when I was young," whatever. And you just know you made the right choice.
Do you feel telling stories keeps you young, it keeps you creative?
Well, I'd like to think that, because I plan to do it till I can't talk anymore.
But for more than $25 a session.
More than 25, yeah. But it isn't always the money.
Right.
It most often is not the money. It's the opportunity to maybe make a difference in somebody's life.
What's the best experience you've had?
Telling stories?
Yeah, in some location or maybe in front of a certain group or something?
Well, I think probably I've had the best experience with some retired people just recently. And I can identify with them and they identify with me
see, yeah.
because we're both older.
Yeah.
And if I talk about things with Jack Benny or mention anything like that, the younger people haven't a clue. But the older people say, no, I know that. And I remember, those radio programs, and I can talk about things that I know, that they know,
Right.
and that younger people don't know. And that's kind of fun for me. And I think it's a way of identifying them with me as well.
What's the key for telling a good story and engaging the audience? If someone wants to go like, wow, this sounds fun, I'd like to be a storyteller, what's the key? What's the advice you have?
I guess if you believe you have something to give as a teller, and you have an aptitude or a way to craft those stories so they appeal to people.
And how do you do that? How's that work?
Or you work with a structure, and
Okay.
you craft it just like you would a play.
Do you practice telling stories?
Oh, of course.
Wow.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
But I don't ever memorize anything. I don't
Oh.
have anything written down.
Right.
It's just, and that's the joy of a storyteller in contrast to being an actor, where you always had to memorize somebody else's words.
Yeah.
But now I
this-
can look right at you in the eye and use my own words, and that's a joy for me to be able to do that and not have to memorize. I'm older, and I don't even know if I could memorize any.
Well, I guess the story that you tell is the story that it is.
It is, and that you can't make a mistake because it's your own story in your own words. Although it may be someone else's story,
right.
it's yours when you make it yours with your own words and your own style and personality, I guess.
Well, I can certainly tell that you really enjoy telling stories, and we're so happy to have you come on the set and reminisce about Gamage. Now you've got more stories to tell about the time you were on Inside Creative Minds.
That's true. I'll tell that story.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, you're
it was
welcome.
a real
It's a pleasure for
A real
me
pleasure.
to be home.
Oh boy, I don't think I can pull this off. Well, that's our show, and I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you have any questions or comments, or maybe you missed a past show, don't worry, we got you covered. Go to InsideCreativeMinds.com, 24/7, 365, just for you. Until next time, ooh, I get a treat.
Welcome to a trilogy of stories of change and transformation. When I was young and in love, I was told there's nothing so constant as change. I didn't want to hear that because it was perfect just the way it was. I'm older now, still in love, but realize that was a true saying. We are always in a state of becoming who we are.